She believed he was feeble. Until he unleashed the might of a human warrior, the planet Zephyria glimmered under the light of twin suns, its landscape a mix of jagged cliffs, glowing plains, and rivers that shimmered like liquid crystal. From her high vantage point atop a rocky ridge, Captain Leora surveyed the battlefield below with practiced eyes. She was tall, her frame muscular and honed from decades of alien military training, and her armor reflected the golden light of the setting suns. Every movement of the alien soldiers under her command was precise, efficient, and coordinated. In her world, strength, speed, and weapon mastery dictated victory, and she prided herself on understanding all three perfectly. Below, the battlefield was quiet except for the occasional rustle of wind and the soft hum of alien machinery. And standing alone, seemingly out of place, was a human, Kale. He was small compared to the towering alien soldiers, his body wiry and unarmored. A simple tunic clung to him, and he carried only a basic energy blaster and a few small, unfamiliar devices that looked more like toys than weapons. Leora raised an eyebrow, suppressing a chuckle. How could someone so fragile hope to survive here? He looked ill-prepared, almost vulnerable, a child against giants. The alien troops around him, sensing their leader's scrutiny, lowered their weapons slightly, waiting for the inevitable. Leora felt the familiar rush of superiority. Humans had a reputation for unpredictability, yes, but that rarely translated into real strength. In her experience, they relied too much on chance and luck. Kale would crumble quickly, that much was certain. Kale, however, did not panic. His gaze swept across the terrain, taking in every hill, ridge, and crevice. Unlike the aliens, he did not move with force but with calculation. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. He seemed small and weak, but there was a focus in his eyes that even the most seasoned alien could not ignore. Leora narrowed her eyes, sensing that this human was unusual. She could not yet determine why, but the instinctive tension in her body told her to watch him closely. Minutes passed and the first alien scouts approached. They moved confidently, expecting an easy encounter. Kale did not raise his blaster immediately. Instead, he crouched, examining the ground beneath him. The first scout stepped into a narrow trench Kale had dug earlier, its depth almost invisible to the untrained eye. A simple trip mechanism, activated by pressure, sent the scout tumbling and entangled him in a web of cables. The scout struggled, calling for help, but Kale was already moving, rolling to another vantage point and adjusting his devices. Leora felt a flicker of unease. This human was not just surviving, he was shaping the battlefield. Her warriors were trained to recognize and neutralize threats quickly, but Kale seemed to anticipate every move. The alien scouts were cautious now, hesitant in ways that disrupted their formations. Leora's pride was challenged. She had seen many brave opponents, but none who combined calm observation with decisive action in this way. Kale's next move was subtle but effective. He released a small drone, its metallic wings buzzing silently. It moved swiftly, scanning for enemy positions and sending signals back to him. With this information, Kale adjusted his defenses, predicting the alien soldiers' path and ensuring that each step they took would expose them to his traps. Leora leaned forward, unable to hide her curiosity. Even if he fell eventually, the human's cleverness was undeniable. The first real engagement began when a group of elite alien warriors moved to surround him. Leora expected Kale to panic or flee, but he did neither. He triggered a sequence of devices, some emitting blinding lights, others releasing nets that tangled legs and weapons alike. The humans he had observed in history simulations relied on ingenuity, and here in the field, Kale proved it. Each alien warrior faced multiple obstacles at once. Their strength and speed meant little against calculated anticipation and clever tactics. Leora descended from her ridge, stepping closer to the edge to witness the battle. Her pride demanded she intervene, but curiosity anchored her feet. She had underestimated the human, and that error gnawed at her. The aliens' assaults grew more coordinated, more aggressive, yet Kale adjusted seamlessly. He did not fight with raw power, but with observation, creativity, and timing. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. The battle had shifted. Instead of the aliens overwhelming him, the humans' makeshift defenses and Kale's tactical thinking had forced the alien soldiers to retreat temporarily, regrouping under Leora's orders. He had survived the first wave unscathed, something that had seemed impossible just hours before. When the dust settled, Kale did not celebrate. He simply checked his devices, repaired minor damages, and observed the remaining alien positions. There was no arrogance, no desire for recognition, just focus. Leora studied him carefully, noting the calm determination in his posture, the way he analyzed rather than reacted. It was a quiet kind of strength, one that her species often overlooked. The next morning, Kale moved carefully through the terrain. Leora observed from a ridge again, noting his use of natural cover, his small traps, and the clever ways he interacted with the environment. A river flowed nearby, and Kale had positioned floating markers that would tip over or release small disturbances in the water if approached. The aliens had no idea he had used the terrain to multiply the effects of his devices. One by one, patrolling units fell into his traps or hesitated, unsure of what awaited them. Leora could no longer deny it. This human was different. He lacked the raw power of an alien soldier, but he compensated in ways she had never imagined. Adaptability, ingenuity, and courage, qualities that could turn even the dire situation into an advantage. She had been so confident in her assumptions, and now, each second Kale survived was a lesson in humility. A small skirmish erupted near the riverbank. Kale moved like water himself, adjusting to each attack with astonishing speed. He used a combination of small explosives and improvised shields, confusing the alien attackers and forcing them to overextend. His movements were unrefined but unpredictable, a combination of instinct and careful observation. Leora's warriors, who prided themselves on disciplined training, were caught off guard again and again. By midday, it was clear that the alien forces were struggling to maintain cohesion. Their confidence was shaken, their perception of human weakness challenged by the reality before them. Leora stepped down to the plain, her feet crunching on the rough ground. Kale noticed her approach but did not flinch. His eyes met hers, calm and unwavering. She felt a strange mix of irritation and admiration. "You've survived this long," she said, her voice steady, "but you cannot win. You are alone, human. Your strength is nothing compared to ours." Kale tilted his head slightly, considering her words. He did not respond immediately, instead observing her stance, her weapons, and her calculated movements. When he finally spoke, it was in a quiet, measured tone. "Strength alone doesn't decide a fight," he said. "Strategy, timing, and understanding your opponent do." Leora frowned, surprised by his insight. She had expected fear, maybe pleading, but not confidence. And certainly not the understanding of tactics that matched, or even surpassed, her own in this moment. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips, though she would never admit it aloud. The alien warriors prepared for another wave, more cautious this time. Leora remained by Kale's side, intrigued despite herself. She wanted to see how far his abilities stretched. The humans had a reputation for cleverness, but nothing in her experience could have prepared her for someone capable of surviving against her army with just wits and determination. As the sun set on the horizon again, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold, Kale activated another series of traps. Rocks rolled down hills, sending shockwaves that disrupted formations. Small drones zipped between the aliens, signaling directions and drawing attention away from Kale's true movements. One by one, alien warriors fell into carefully laid snares, each misstep orchestrated with precision. Leora watched silently, realizing that she was witnessing the birth of a legend. The human before her was proving that the measure of a warrior was not only in their muscles or weapons, but in their mind, heart, and adaptability. She had believed him feeble, but he was anything but. By nightfall, the battlefield was quiet again. The alien forces withdrew for the evening, regrouping and licking their wounds. Kale had survived not by brute strength, but by turning the environment, his intellect, and his courage into weapons. Leora stood a few meters away, her eyes never leaving him. Respect had begun to replace her initial disdain, though she would not acknowledge it out loud. Kale, as always, remained calm. He did not celebrate. He cleaned his small equipment, adjusted minor settings on his devices, and prepared for the next day. In the quiet of the evening, he looked up at the twin moons rising over Zephyria. He did not feel fear, only determination. Leora, watching from her ridge, felt a stirring she had never experienced before. Curiosity, yes, but also a challenge to her pride. She had assumed humans were weak. She had assumed Kale would fall, yet here he was, alive, unbroken, and ready to continue. And for the first time, she realized that underestimating humans could be the greatest mistake any alien could make. The first light of Zephyria's twin suns revealed the scarred plains where Kale had survived the previous day. The air was filled with tension, a quiet that spoke of anticipation rather than calm. Leora observed from a distant ridge, her eyes tracking every movement below. She had not expected Kale to withstand the initial assaults, and yet here he was, preparing for the next wave with unshakable composure. The Alien War Council, however, was not so forgiving. Frustration rippled through their ranks. Their elite soldiers had been defeated, not by superior strength, but by cleverness and patience. The council demanded results, and they demanded swift victory. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm the human with superior numbers and force him into surrender. Leora, although curious about Kale, followed orders. She was the captain, bound to execute the plan, but a part of her remained skeptical that sheer numbers alone could succeed. The human had already defied all expectations. Kale did not wait for the aliens to strike first. He moved quickly through the terrain, checking the traps he had set the day before. Many had survived the previous skirmishes intact, but a few had been compromised. Adjusting them with deft hands, he used the rocks, the crystal rivers, and the jagged cliffs to maximize their effect. Each trap was a calculated risk, designed to delay, distract, and weaken the approaching alien forces. Kale was not fighting to win in a single moment. He was shaping the battlefield for a longer engagement, one that relied on patience, timing, and ingenuity. The first attack came sooner than expected. Alien skimmers roared across the plains, their energy cannons glowing ominously. The riders were confident, their speed a weapon Kale could not match physically, yet he was prepared. Small devices he had constructed sent localized electromagnetic pulses, disrupting the skimmers' circuits and forcing them to crash. Rocks tumbled down natural slopes, triggered by hidden tripwires, striking the approaching aliens with force and precision. The battlefield was no longer empty. It was a labyrinth of danger that Kale had created. Leora watched, fascinated and uneasy. The humans in her records were clever, yes, but this went beyond intelligence. Kale anticipated her strategies as if he could read minds. Every trap, every diversion, every calculated step seemed to counter her expectations. The elite alien warriors she had trained, disciplined, and strong were faltering. Frustration showed on their faces, and fear, subtle but present, began to creep in. Kale moved like a shadow through the chaos. He did not engage in direct combat unless absolutely necessary. When an alien soldier stumbled too close, Kale reacted with precision. He used the environment itself, tipping a small boulder, activating a net, or redirecting a flowing stream to neutralize the threat. Each time, he preserved his energy and avoided unnecessary exposure. His tactics were simple, yet brilliantly effective, blending patience, observation, and improvisation into a seamless display of strategy. As the battle continued, the alien forces began to adapt. They split into smaller units, attempting to flank Kale and force him into open ground. But Kale was ready. He had mapped the terrain mentally, noting choke points, narrow paths, and unstable surfaces. Each move they made led them into traps carefully positioned for maximum effect. Some were simple, mechanical setups. Others relied on timing and coordination, almost like a dance of destruction choreographed to Kale's will. Leora could no longer watch from a distance. The human had survived multiple waves of attacks, and she knew the aliens would not relent. She descended to the battlefield, moving with grace and silent confidence. Her presence alone commanded attention, drawing the focus of both Kale and her soldiers. Unlike the others, she did not underestimate him. She wanted to see his methods firsthand, to understand why this human had become such a formidable obstacle. Kale noticed her approach, but he did not pause. His calm, steady movements gave the impression that he was unafraid, even though the tallest, strongest alien warrior on Zephyria was heading directly toward him. Kale's eyes flicked to Leora, analyzing her posture, the angle of her energy blade, and the weight distribution in her armor. He recognized patterns that indicated attack sequences and defensive maneuvers. This was not a simple confrontation. This was a test of adaptability, and Kale thrived in such moments. The two faced each other briefly, the silence between them heavy with unspoken challenge. Then, without hesitation, the alien soldiers renewed their assault. Kale activated a series of devices that sent smoke and holographic images into the battlefield, confusing the attackers and forcing them to hesitate. His movements were quick, decisive, and deliberate, striking where opportunity appeared and retreating when risk outweighed gain. Leora's eyes widened slightly as she observed him. He was not fighting with conventional power. His body was smaller, his weapons limited, yet his ability to manipulate the environment and anticipate attacks was extraordinary. She had trained generations of elite soldiers, yet this human had forced her to reconsider everything she knew about combat. In his survival, she saw not weakness, but a different kind of strength, a human strength that was underestimated at every level. Hours passed. The battle wore on, and the alien forces grew more cautious. Frustration turned into confusion, and confusion into doubt. Kale had not only survived, but had caused significant damage, slowing the enemy's advance and disrupting their coordination. His calm and focus were unshakable, even as the suns rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Leora finally moved closer. She stepped into the fray, her energy blade humming softly as she deflected attacks from alien soldiers attempting to break through Kale's defenses. The human responded with quick thinking, using small devices to redirect attacks and manipulating the terrain to gain advantages. Even in direct proximity, Kale did not rely on brute force. He relied on ingenuity, patience, and the courage to act decisively when opportunity arose. By midday, the alien command center sent reinforcements, thinking sheer numbers could overwhelm him. Kale anticipated this. He had studied the patterns of movement, predicted arrival points, and prepared traps specifically designed for larger forces. Rocks fell from cliffs, channels released pressurized streams, and small but strategically placed explosives created chaos. Alien formations broke apart as soldiers scrambled to avoid hazards, proving that even vast numbers could not compensate for lack of foresight and adaptability. Leora's respect grew. She had thought this human feeble, unprepared, and incapable. She had been wrong. His strength was not measured in muscle or weaponry, but in his mind, his foresight, and his determination to survive and adapt. He was teaching her without words that strength came in many forms. Despite the pressure, Kale remained humble. He did not seek glory. Each action was calculated for survival, for protection, and for the chance to change the battle's outcome. He cared little for reputation or recognition, focusing instead on the immediate problem and the long-term strategy. The alien soldiers, by contrast, were frustrated by the unpredictability of his actions. Their usual confidence was shaken. As the day turned toward evening, the battlefield settled into a tense quiet. The aliens regrouped, nursing minor losses and reconsidering tactics. Kale checked his devices and traps, repaired what was damaged, and observed the alien positions with a critical eye. Leora stood nearby, silent, studying him. She felt something she had never experienced before, admiration for a species she had long thought inferior in physical combat. "Your survival is impressive," Leora said, her voice carrying over the plain. Kale did not look at her immediately. He continued to adjust his equipment, methodical and calm. "Survival is only part of the fight," he replied finally. "Understanding your opponent, using the environment, and staying patient, those are the real tools of strength." Leora could not deny it. The human's ability to think, adapt, and endure in the face of overwhelming odds was extraordinary. She had assumed that Kale's small frame and limited weaponry were liabilities, but they had become assets when combined with his intelligence and courage. The twin suns dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Kale moved quietly, preparing for the night, knowing the aliens would attempt another strike. Leora followed silently, curious and cautious. The human had survived a full day of assaults, manipulated the battlefield to his advantage, and proven that what she had once seen as weakness could, in fact, be power in disguise. By nightfall, the alien forces retreated to their temporary base, shaken and uncertain. Kale, as always, did not celebrate. He quietly tended to his devices, reinforced his traps, and reviewed the terrain. Leora remained nearby, silently acknowledging the human's skill. She had underestimated him, and now she understood the cost of such assumptions. For the first time in her career, Leora felt challenged not by superior strength, but by superior will and intellect. Kale was teaching her, and perhaps the galaxy, that humans were not to be dismissed. They could endure, adapt, and overcome in ways that even the most powerful alien warriors could not predict. As the night deepened, Kale looked up at the stars, calm and focused. He had survived today, but he knew the fight was far from over. The aliens would return, and he would face them again. Yet he was ready, armed with his ingenuity, his patience, and the courage that defined the human spirit. Leora watched him quietly, her respect growing with each passing moment. She had believed him feeble, a mere human, fragile and untrained. But she was wrong. Kale was a force that defied expectation, a warrior who relied not on brute strength but on strategy, courage, and adaptability. And in this realization, she felt a spark of something she had never felt before: admiration, and perhaps even a hint of challenge. The battle was far from over, but one thing was certain. This human, underestimated and overlooked, had already begun to change the way the galaxy viewed strength, resilience, and the power of the human warrior spirit. The next day on Zephyria dawned with a sharp, cold light. The twin suns cast pale reflections over the plains, and the battlefield seemed quieter than before. But the calm was misleading. Leora knew the human Kale had not simply survived by luck. He had survived by understanding, adapting, and predicting every move the alien forces had made. Today, she intended to test him herself. Leora's footsteps were silent as she descended from her ridge. Her armor, designed for intimidation and protection, gleamed faintly in the early light. She was the epitome of a seasoned warrior, every muscle trained, every reflex honed. To her, combat was a language of strength and precision. She had defeated countless enemies, led armies, and never once doubted the supremacy of her skills. Yet Kale had made her doubt, if only slightly, and that doubt fueled her curiosity. Kale, meanwhile, moved carefully through the jagged terrain, eyes sharp and alert. He had spent the night studying the previous day's engagements, noting the strengths and weaknesses of his opponents. His devices were charged, traps were reinforced, and his awareness of the environment was acute. Unlike the aliens, who relied heavily on technology and brute force, Kale relied on observation, anticipation, and quick adaptation. He was patient, waiting for the right moment to act rather than reacting out of instinct or pride. The first contact of the day came when a small patrol of alien scouts attempted to encircle him. They moved confidently, expecting the human to repeat his previous tactics. But Kale was ready. He had arranged small decoys and noise devices that misdirected the scouts, drawing them into narrow gullies and over uneven ground. The scouts stumbled, tripped, and fell into minor traps, their energy weapons momentarily useless against the environment's hazards. Leora observed the skirmish from a nearby ridge. She was impressed by Kale's calm under pressure and the precision of his improvisation. It was one thing to survive an ambush. It was another to manipulate your enemy's movements so effectively. She realized that Kale was not fighting in the traditional sense. He was orchestrating the battle itself. Every step he took shaped the battlefield, turning disadvantage into opportunity. The aliens' attempts grew more aggressive as the day progressed. Reinforcements arrived, larger units with heavier armor and advanced weaponry. Leora watched them move into position, expecting the human to falter under the pressure. But Kale did not hesitate. He deployed a series of small but strategically placed devices that disrupted the aliens' coordination. Rocks and small boulders tumbled down cliffs, triggered by hidden mechanisms. Streams of water were redirected to create slippery surfaces. Even the faintest vibrations were harnessed to alert Kale to approaching enemies. Leora could see the surprise on the alien soldiers' faces as their superior numbers became less advantageous. The battlefield, once open and predictable, had been transformed into a maze of hazards that Kale navigated effortlessly. She stepped closer, observing his movements in real time. His eyes were constantly scanning, evaluating, and calculating. Each step was deliberate, each decision purposeful. She had underestimated him, and the evidence was undeniable. Finally, she decided to confront him directly. She moved swiftly across the terrain, closing the distance between them with the grace of a predator. Kale noticed her approach immediately, but his calm demeanor did not falter. He adjusted his position, subtly shifting his devices and preparing for the encounter. Unlike the alien soldiers, he did not rely on intimidation or raw strength. Instead, he relied on anticipation and clever use of his environment. When Leora arrived, the human looked up at her without fear. His small frame contrasted sharply with her towering presence, yet there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that made her pause. She had expected to see hesitation, maybe even terror. Instead, she saw focus and confidence, qualities that reminded her of the warriors she had trained, but had rarely seen in someone so physically unassuming. "You've survived against overwhelming odds," Leora said, her voice steady and controlled. "But this ends now. You cannot match my skill." Kale studied her carefully. He understood her style, recognized her confidence, and noted the way she assessed threats. He did not respond immediately, choosing instead to wait for her to make the first move. His patience was a weapon in itself, forcing Leora to act while he observed and adapted. The duel began with small, cautious movements. Leora tested Kale, striking lightly, observing his reactions. The human did not panic. He moved swiftly, dodging with precision, using the terrain to his advantage. He was unpredictable, combining sudden bursts of movement with strategic retreats. Each counter was clever, not forceful, and it frustrated Leora more than she expected. She increased the intensity, striking harder, faster, and with more precision. Kale responded by anticipating her moves, redirecting momentum, and using her strength against her. A swing that would have crushed another opponent was turned aside with a simple shift in stance. A rush forward was countered by a cleverly timed diversion. Leora's attacks, once confident and assured, began to meet resistance she had not expected. The battle continued across the plains. Kale did not attempt to overpower Leora. Instead, he maneuvered, creating situations where her strength became less effective. He drew her into areas where rocks, cliffs, and streams could aid his defense. Each movement showcased human ingenuity and adaptability. Leora began to feel something she had never experienced before: respect for an opponent who could match her intellect and strategy without relying on the same physical prowess. Hours passed, and the skirmishes around them continued. Kale's presence on the battlefield had altered the course of the fight. Small alien units struggled to navigate the traps and obstacles he had set, while Leora found herself constantly adjusting to his unpredictable counters. What had seemed like a simple confrontation between a human and a seasoned warrior had become a test of endurance, wit, and creativity. At one point, Leora launched a sudden series of strikes meant to overwhelm him. Kale responded with a combination of agility and foresight, redirecting her attacks and turning her momentum to his advantage. In a blur of movement, he forced her to step back, gaining a slight upper hand. Leora felt a rush of surprise and admiration. She had underestimated the human's ability to learn and adapt mid-battle. Despite the intensity, Kale remained calm. He did not show fatigue or fear. Every move was calculated, every decision deliberate. Leora, watching closely, began to recognize a pattern. He was not just defending himself. He was studying her, learning her style, predicting her moves, and using that knowledge to survive and control the encounter. The realization hit her hard. Humans were not merely survivors. They were thinkers, innovators, and adaptive warriors in their own right. The sun reached its zenith, casting harsh light across the plains. Leora paused for a moment, breathing steadily, and assessed the situation. The human had survived multiple direct confrontations, manipulated the battlefield, and forced her to reconsider everything she had assumed about strength. Her pride demanded that she admit she had misjudged him, though she did not say it aloud. Kale, as always, remained composed. He adjusted a small device, watching the alien movements and planning his next steps. He did not seek to harm unnecessarily. His goal was survival, and to demonstrate that strength could take many forms. Leora's eyes followed him, noticing the subtle ways he used simple objects, the terrain, and his mind to create advantages. The afternoon brought renewed assaults. Larger alien squads attempted to encircle Kale, confident that sheer numbers would force him into a corner. But the human was ready. He had predicted such a maneuver and prepared accordingly. Traps, diversions, and the clever use of terrain allowed him to split their attention, disrupt coordination, and maintain the upper hand despite the disadvantage in numbers. Leora joined the engagement, not to attack, but to observe closely. She was learning from him, noting how his mind worked in real time. He did not rely on speed or power alone. He relied on creativity, timing, and an unshakable will. The battlefield had become a demonstration of human adaptability, a live example of what she had previously underestimated. By the time the twin suns began to dip toward the horizon, the alien forces had suffered significant setbacks. Their formations were disrupted, and morale was shaken. Kale, small and unassuming, had changed the course of the battle without ever matching them in physical strength. Leora, standing a short distance away, could no longer deny what she had witnessed. This human was remarkable. "Your methods, they are unlike anything I've seen," Leora said quietly, stepping closer. Kale glanced at her, his expression calm. "Strength is not always what it seems," he replied simply. "It can be measured in courage, intelligence, and the ability to adapt." Leora's gaze softened, though she remained vigilant. For the first time, she truly understood what humans were capable of when underestimated. The battlefield around them was quieting, but the lesson lingered in her mind. She had assumed feebleness where there was strength, weakness where there was ingenuity, and fragility where there was endurance. As night fell, Kale prepared for rest, checking his devices and reinforcing the traps. Leora stood nearby, silent, reflecting on the day's events. She had faced many warriors in her lifetime, but none like this human. He had survived, adapted, and taught her a lesson in strength that would not be forgotten. The stars emerged, sparkling above Zephyria, and the plains cooled in the night air. Kale looked up at the sky, calm and composed, knowing that the alien forces would return. He had survived today through intellect, patience, and courage, but the true test was still to come. Leora, watching him from the shadows, realized that the story of this human warrior was only beginning, and that underestimating him again would be a mistake no one could afford. The morning on Zephyria arrived with a restless energy. The plains, scarred from previous skirmishes, seemed almost alive under the twin suns' glare. Leora stood on a ridge, surveying the battlefield with a mixture of anticipation and concern. The alien war council had grown impatient. Their pride demanded that Kale, the lone human, be defeated, and swiftly. But Leora, though bound by duty, could not ignore the remarkable display of ingenuity and courage she had witnessed. She had underestimated him once, and she was not eager to repeat that mistake. Kale, small against the expanse of Zephyria, moved quietly along a narrow path between jagged cliffs. His steps were deliberate, each one measured to avoid detection. He had spent the night reinforcing his traps and improvising new devices that would give him an edge against overwhelming numbers. Though his frame was unassuming, his mind was sharp, calculating every possible scenario the aliens could attempt. Kale understood that brute strength alone would not win the battle. He had to rely on creativity, speed, and the courage to act decisively. As the first alien units approached, Kale was ready. He had anticipated their movements, noting the routes most likely to be taken and setting traps accordingly. Small devices released blinding light and loud noise, confusing the soldiers and forcing them into narrow paths where boulders could be tipped or pitfalls triggered. The aliens moved cautiously, aware that their previous confidence had been shaken. Kale's meticulous preparation was evident in every detail of the terrain. Leora descended from the ridge, her armor gleaming in the sunlight. She carried herself with the calm authority of a seasoned warrior, yet her eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity. She wanted to witness Kale in direct confrontation with larger forces, to see how far his ingenuity and determination could carry him. She understood that what he lacked in size and raw strength, he more than made up for in intellect, adaptability, and courage. The first engagement began with a surge of alien warriors attempting to overwhelm Kale. They moved with coordinated precision, relying on numbers and advanced weapons. Yet Kale's preparation turned the battlefield into a maze of obstacles. Rocks fell from cliffs, streams shifted unexpectedly, and small devices released smoke and light to disorient the attackers. Each movement was anticipated, each trap calculated to delay or incapacitate the enemy without putting Kale at unnecessary risk. Leora watched, impressed despite herself. The human strategies were unorthodox yet effective. Where her soldiers would rely on overwhelming force, Kale relied on observation, timing, and adaptability. He turned every disadvantage into an advantage, forcing the aliens to rethink their approach. The larger units moved cautiously now, hesitant to advance, their confidence shaken by the unpredictability of his tactics. Kale's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. He did not panic, did not rush, and did not act recklessly. Each decision was deliberate, a careful balance between offense and defense. When a group of elite warriors attempted to flank him, he used the terrain to create confusion, channeling them into narrow passages where traps could be triggered simultaneously. His understanding of spatial dynamics and enemy behavior gave him an edge that brute force could not overcome. As the battle intensified, Kale caught sight of Leora approaching the enemy's rear. Her presence was commanding, her movements swift and precise. Unlike the other aliens, she did not rely solely on strength. She was a master strategist, analyzing and adapting in real time. Kale adjusted his approach, using her focus on the alien forces to his advantage. Small devices diverted attention, creating openings and forcing soldiers into disadvantageous positions. Hours passed, and the tide of the battle began to shift. The alien forces, once confident in their superiority, struggled to maintain formation. Morale faltered as soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to proceed against a human who seemed to anticipate their every move. Kale's ingenuity and resourcefulness were on full display. He was not just surviving, he was controlling the battlefield, turning the alien forces' strengths into weaknesses and using their confidence against them. Leora observed silently, noting the precision of his movements. Every step he took, every device activated, every diversion created was calculated to maximize effect while minimizing risk. She realized that Kale's strength lay not in brute force, but in his ability to think, adapt, and endure. His courage and creativity allowed him to face impossible odds with remarkable success. The climax of the day approached as the Alien War Council deployed their heaviest units, confident that raw power would overwhelm the human. Kale, however, was ready. He had anticipated their arrival, positioning traps and obstacles that forced the massive soldiers into predictable paths. Streams of water created slippery surfaces, rocks toppled strategically, and his devices emitted blinding flashes that disrupted coordination. The larger units, though powerful, were constrained by the environment and Kale's clever manipulation of it. Leora stepped forward to intervene directly. She moved with a fluid grace, engaging elite soldiers with precision strikes while observing Kale. Her intent was not to dominate him, but to witness his abilities firsthand. Kale responded with quick thinking and rapid adjustments, using her presence and the shifting battlefield to his advantage. He created openings, redirected momentum, and forced the enemy to react to his actions rather than dictating his own. As the battle reached its peak, Kale faced the alien warlord himself. The massive figure advanced with a sense of superiority, expecting to crush the human with overwhelming strength. Kale, small but resolute, assessed the warlord's movements carefully. He did not attempt to match the brute force. Instead, he used timing, observation, and clever positioning to exploit openings. The warlord struck with immense power, but Kale redirected energy, used the terrain, and maneuvered in ways that left the alien momentarily off balance. The encounter drew the attention of all remaining soldiers. They watched in disbelief as Kale, with no armor or advanced weaponry, countered and evaded attacks from a being far stronger than him. His ingenuity turned the warlord's aggression against him, and every move demonstrated the effectiveness of intelligence, adaptability, and courage in battle. Leora, standing nearby, could hardly believe what she saw. She had assumed humans were physically inferior, but Kale's display proved otherwise. In a decisive moment, Kale triggered a coordinated set of traps, using environmental advantages to destabilize the warlord and force him to retreat temporarily. The alien forces, shaken and disorganized, hesitated. Kale did not pursue recklessly. He maintained control, understanding that patience and strategy were more valuable than blind aggression. His calm determination and resourcefulness had turned what seemed like certain defeat into an overwhelming display of human capability. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Kale moved carefully, reinforcing traps and ensuring that the alien forces could not regroup easily. Leora watched from a distance, admiration and respect replacing her initial skepticism. The human warrior had done what she had believed impossible, survived, adapted, and defeated forces far superior in strength and numbers. As night fell, the battlefield quieted. Kale prepared for the next day, repairing devices and planning for potential counterattacks. Leora stood nearby, reflecting on the events of the day. She had believed him feeble, but he had demonstrated extraordinary ingenuity, courage, and resilience. She realized that underestimating humans was a grave mistake, one that could no longer be repeated. The twin moons rose over Zephyria, illuminating the plains with a soft silver glow. Kale looked up at the stars, calm and contemplative. He knew the aliens would return, but he was prepared. His strength was not in size or weapons, but in his mind, his courage, and his ability to adapt. Leora, watching silently, understood that she had witnessed a turning point, not just for the battle, but for her perception of humanity. The human warrior had proven that true strength came in many forms, and that determination, intelligence, and adaptability could overcome even the greatest physical disadvantages. Leora knew that the story of Kale's courage would not end here. He had changed the course of the battle and the perception of humans forever. The twin suns of Zephyria were just rising, casting pale light across the battlefield. The plains were scarred with the remnants of previous skirmishes, rocks overturned, devices scattered, and streams diverted. Kale moved cautiously, observing the positions of the alien forces. He knew today would be the most challenging day yet. The aliens had learned from the past encounters, adapting their tactics, bringing stronger units, and moving with sharper precision. But Kale had also learned. Every encounter had taught him, sharpened his instincts, and honed his ability to adapt. Today he would show the true might of a human warrior, not through size, not through brute force, but through courage, ingenuity, and relentless determination. Leora stood on a ridge, watching him. She had grown to respect Kale over the past days. Initially, she had believed him feeble, unprepared, and fragile. But he had survived multiple assaults, manipulated the battlefield, and consistently outsmarted forces far stronger than him. She now understood that human strength was not always obvious. It was subtle, strategic, and often underestimated by those who judged only by physical appearance. Leora knew that the coming engagement would reveal the full extent of Kale's abilities. The first wave of aliens advanced with renewed confidence. Their formations were tighter, their weapons more powerful, and their strategies adapted to counter Kale's previous tactics. But the human warrior was ready. He had spent the night reinforcing his defenses, creating new devices, and studying the terrain. Small tripwires, pressure sensors, and cleverly positioned obstacles turned the battlefield into a dynamic maze, unpredictable and dangerous. Kale did not seek to overpower his opponents. He sought to control the flow of the engagement. As the aliens approached, Kale activated a series of devices. Small bursts of light and sound diverted the enemy's attention, forcing them into narrow paths lined with traps. Rocks rolled down cliffs, streams redirected to create slippery surfaces, and minor explosive devices disrupted their formations. The alien soldiers, confident in their training and numbers, were caught off guard. Kale's ingenuity had transformed their strengths into weaknesses once again. Leora descended from her ridge, moving swiftly and gracefully. She engaged elite soldiers, demonstrating her own combat skill while keeping a careful eye on Kale. Her presence added complexity to the battlefield, but Kale used it to his advantage. He anticipated her movements, predicted the impact of her attacks, and positioned himself to maintain control of the engagement. Every step, every device, every tactic showcased the human ability to adapt and overcome. Hours passed as the battle escalated. Alien forces, frustrated and disoriented, struggled to maintain formation. Kale moved among the chaos, nimble and deliberate, avoiding direct confrontation unless necessary. When a soldier came too close, he used the terrain to redirect momentum, employ a diversion, or trigger a trap. He was not merely reacting, he was orchestrating, turning each challenge into an opportunity. Leora watched in silent awe. She had faced countless opponents, trained armies, and led campaigns across Zephyria, yet none had demonstrated this combination of intellect, courage, and adaptability. Kale's small frame belied the true power he wielded, a power that came from strategy, foresight, and an unshakable will. By midday, the Alien War Council dispatched their heaviest units, confident that raw power would finally defeat the human. Massive armored warriors moved into position, energy weapons crackling, intent on overwhelming Kale with sheer strength. The battlefield seemed impossible to navigate for someone so small and unarmored, but Kale had anticipated this. He had spent days studying the patterns of the aliens, observing their preferred formations and tactics. His traps were positioned to exploit those tendencies. Narrow passages channeled the heavily armored soldiers into vulnerable positions. Loose rocks and unstable surfaces created hazards for their weight and speed. Small devices released blinding flashes of light and bursts of noise, disrupting communication and coordination. The human warrior had transformed the battlefield into a weapon itself. Leora stepped forward, not to attack, but to witness the full extent of Kale's abilities. She moved among the alien forces, engaging them with precision strikes, observing and adapting her own tactics in response to Kale's orchestration. She realized that Kale was teaching a lesson not just to the aliens, but to her as well. Strength was not measured only by size or weapons, but by intelligence, courage, and the ability to adapt under pressure. The clash reached its climax when Kale faced the alien warlord. The massive figure advanced with terrifying power, expecting to crush the human quickly. Kale, small and unassuming, met him with unwavering focus. He did not attempt to match the brute's strength. He relied on anticipation, observation, and timing. The warlord struck with immense force, yet Kale moved with agility, redirecting momentum, using the terrain, and exploiting openings created by his environment. The engagement drew the attention of all remaining soldiers. They watched in awe as the human not only survived, but controlled the flow of combat. Each movement was precise, each decision calculated. Kale's ingenuity and courage turned what seemed like an impossible confrontation into a demonstration of human adaptability and willpower. Leora observed silently, recognizing that the human warrior had reached the pinnacle of his potential. In a decisive maneuver, Kale triggered a sequence of traps that destabilized the warlord and forced him to retreat temporarily. The alien forces, shaken and disoriented, hesitated. Kale did not pursue recklessly. He maintained control, understanding that patience and strategy were more valuable than reckless aggression. His calm determination, ingenuity, and endurance had turned the battlefield in his favor. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across Zephyria. The alien forces, demoralized and defeated, began to withdraw. Kale moved through the battlefield, checking his devices and ensuring no surprises remained. Leora, standing nearby, approached him. Her armor was scuffed, her movements measured, but her expression was one of deep respect. "You have proven what I never believed possible," she said quietly. "You have survived, adapted, and defeated forces far stronger than yourself. I misjudged you." Kale looked at her calmly. "Strength is not always about size or power," he replied. "It is about courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. Anyone can be strong if they understand how to use their mind and heart as well as their body." Leora nodded, understanding finally dawning. She had assumed feebleness where there was strength, weakness where there was resilience, and fragility where there was courage. Kale had shown her, and the alien forces, that humans possessed a power beyond what could be measured in weapons or armor. As night fell, the battlefield quieted. Stars sparkled above, and the twin moons cast silver light across the plains. Kale stood among the wreckage, calm and composed. He had survived against impossible odds, manipulated the environment, and demonstrated the might of the human warrior. Leora, standing silently, recognized that the perception of humanity had changed forever. The alien forces retreated to regroup, humbled and wary. They had learned that strength alone could not guarantee victory, and that underestimating humans was a mistake with costly consequences. Kale, small but resolute, had proven that courage, intelligence, and adaptability could triumph over raw power. Leora approached Kale once more. She extended her hand, a gesture of respect. "You have my acknowledgement, human," she said. "You are not what I believed. You are stronger, wiser, and braver than I imagined." Kale shook her hand, smiling faintly. "Thank you. But remember, strength is not always what it seems. Sometimes it is the smallest, most unassuming who make the greatest difference." The plains of Zephyria were quiet now, the battlefield calm under the twin moons. Kale's courage, ingenuity, and unwavering determination had changed the course of events. Leora's respect for him was evident, and even the alien war council, humbled by the defeat, would remember the lesson. Humans were not merely fragile beings, they were adaptive, intelligent, and resilient, a species capable of feats beyond expectation. As he gazed at the stars, Kale understood that this battle was only one of many challenges he would face. But he was ready. He had shown the galaxy that human courage and ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable odds. He had survived, adapted, and triumphed, and in doing so, he had unleashed the true might of the human warrior. Leora watched him, knowing that the story of Kale's courage would be told across the galaxy for generations. She had once believed him feeble. Now she knew the truth. The human warrior was a force beyond reckoning, a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and indomitable spirit. The twin moons rose higher, casting their glow over Zephyria. Kale, small yet formidable, stood as a testament to the strength of humanity. And as the galaxy watched, the legend of the human warrior who had defied impossible odds began. A story of courage, strategy, and the power that comes not from size, but from heart and mind.